Hello, and welcome to the Gravel Ride Podcast, where we go deep on the sport of gravel cycling through in-depth interviews with product designers, event organizers, and athletes who are pioneering the sport. I'm your host, Craig Dalton, a lifelong cyclist who discovered gravel cycling back in 2016 and made all the mistakes you don't need to make. I approach each episode as a beginner to unlock all the knowledge you need to become a great gravel cyclist. This week on the podcast, I'm going to hand the microphone over to my co-host, Randall Jacobs, who's got Brad Bingham from Bingham Built Bicycles out of Steamboat Springs, Colorado on the podcast. You may have seen some of his beautiful titanium bikes floating around the world. I remember the first time I saw one up at Dawn Patrol here in Mill Valley. Beautiful bike, exceptional welds. It was like, where did you get that thing? I haven't seen too many of them around, so it was super exciting to actually see one in the flesh and validate what I've known for a long time, that Brad builds beautiful bikes. Randall and he jump into a deep conversation that covers a lot of the elements of building bikes, some of the compromises that we've discussed earlier on this podcast when I was building my own custom frame. It's a robust and hearty conversation that lasted about an hour and 20 minutes. I was trying to find a natural place to break it up, but I actually couldn't, so I'm just going to let it stand. So if you need to break this episode in your own personal listening into a couple different time slots, I understand, but it's a great conversation. Again, another one I'm looking forward to re-listening to, just because I think you can learn a lot from Brad's vast experience in the industry, coupled with Randall's experience. With that said, let's jump right into the conversation.
Yeah, so I'm Brad Bingham. I'm based out of Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and I'm a custom titanium frame builder. I've been doing that here in Colorado for, going on, 27 years?
Wow, yeah. 27 years.
Correct. Yeah.
You don't look, you started welding when you were like 8?
No, I really started welding in earnest senior in high school. And then,
no kidding.
And then, yeah, I moved here to Steamboat right after I turned 20. And
so yeah. Tell me about those first welding experiences. How'd you get into it? Was it starting with bikes, or was it was it a vocational program? What was the nature of the...
It was very bike centric. So
okay.
I knew that I wanted to construct bike frames, mountain bikes specifically. And to do that, I needed to know how to, join two tubes together. And at the time, I was 18 years old and didn't have any welding experience whatsoever. So I went and took a evening, community college TIG welding course. It was like a 75-hour course, and took that in the evenings after work. And I walked in there with a couple of parted off pieces of Reynolds bike tubing, and I said, I just need to know how to put these two things together.
And so this is really, this has been your path in life since the beginning. Mm-hmm. It seems like an increasingly rare phenomenon to have such clarity at a young age at what you want to do, and then to go out and do it. So good on you. Some of us, it takes a lot longer.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I was always really passionate about making things. I just always needed to be making something or working on something. And luckily the bikes found me, because I was a rider, and the idea of building bikes was, not anything that crossed my mind until a good friend of mine said, well, why don't you just build your own? And that was the genesis.
So, and we were just talking a moment ago, I was apologizing for the state of affairs in my house, because I'm in the process of building a new house around the husk of a old derelict but lovely home that I just purchased. And you mentioned you built your home as well. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about that. I'm kind of curious about this builder mentality in a more general sense.
Yeah, I did not, obviously I did not build the entire home myself. My dad was a custom home builder for 25 years. And so he was retired at the time. And this was 2000, like 2002 to 2004. He had just recently finished a home, helping out my sister build a home in Bend, Oregon. And so about a year and a half after that, I talked him into coming out here and helping me build a home. So it was a big project, but really I have to say he did at least 85% of the heavy lifting. Like,
got it.
Yeah. I mean, he was amazing. He passed away in 2008. But he was just a super smart guy and really good at building homes and being efficient, not wasting materials. I was working for Moots at the time, didn't have a huge salary or anything. It's not like I was a rich guy. We were really trying to build it as inexpensively as possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think, granted, sounds like your father was far more expert than mine, but we share that my father passed in 2007, and I didn't get to build a home with him, but I did get to work on a couple of properties that my parents had purchased with an aunt and uncle. And these properties were always underwater and always, falling apart, and they'd never had the budget to do, to hire out. And so it's just like, all right, we need to figure this out. And that's how I learned, one of the key ways that I learned how to use tools, how to do things for myself. And there's a certain sense of, one, personal responsibility, and also with that personal, competence and confidence that goes with learning from a young age to do things. Like, you don't need to hire an expert. You can consult experts, maybe sometimes you do, but you can learn this. So that would seem to have carried into a lot of things in what you've done, starting at age 20, welding frames.
Yeah. And prior to that, I was always on my dad's job sites, mostly cleaning up,
as one does when you're a grunt.
Yep. But yeah, you do learn a lot, and yeah, good stuff.
That's great. So tell me, so you mentioned you take this course, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're in high school or just out of high school, and you go to work for Moots right after. How'd that come about?
No, I had the opportunity in high school to be part of a cooperative work experience with the world's largest dental equipment manufacturer. So I worked in their engineering department, really as a draftsperson, senior year in high school, and then that carried over into after high school. I was not there was a lot of life things that kind of slowed me down from going to college. My mom was recovering from some pretty harsh cancer, and I wasn't really excited to leave her. My parents were recently divorced. All these things kind of piled up to me staying in my hometown for a year after high school. And I continued to work in that engineering department. And kind of the path would have been to go into mechanical engineering from there. But I kind of looked around and I was like, I don't think this is for me. I just, I don't want to just be kind of a cog in the wheel, cog in the machine. I wanted to have a more greater grasp, more of the whole scope of projects. And that's, bike building allows you to do that.
Well, for better or for worse in a lot of regards, especially in the beginning when you're trying to get off the ground.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the product, it's the business, it's the marketing, and which is really just another way of saying, how do you communicate? How do you build awareness? How do you connect with people?
Sure.
So then, walk us through kind of what that journey looks like.
So, it's funny. I like I said, a gentleman that I worked with, who was a really good friend at the dental equipment manufacturer. He ended up becoming, years later, he was director of engineering. This is a big, major company, like 1,200 employees on site, major manufacturing capabilities right there in my hometown, which is just outside of Portland, Oregon. And
And what types of products?
oh,
Have I had your products in my mouth at some point?
maybe not maybe not literally in your mouth, but potentially, actually, yeah, you probably have, like the the little suction wand that
Hmm.
goes in your mouth while you're at the dentist. Yeah, I mean
Oh yeah.
they even produce that. So the company was ADEC, and
Okay.
you walk into certain dental offices, and you'll see that every single piece in that office, it's me. Sorry, is
Oh, okay.
every single piece has ADEC on it. Literally, from the chair that you're sitting on to the cabinets, literally everything.
So what I'm hearing is here you are, this young kid in high school or just out of high school. You get
Hmm.
this opportunity to work in a very large organization in
Hmm.
with seasoned professionals doing medical products at a whole nother layer of complexity in terms of design and development and supply chain and things like that.
Hmm.
And so you're dealing with that sort of thing. And that was kind of your jumping off point.
Yeah, yeah, and um, I got into the bike building thing because my buddy that I rode with, I broke a couple of Cannondales, and he said, why don't you just make your own?"
Yeah.
And so, of course, I did, and it kind of spiraled. I was in his garage late every single night machining something, and kind of once I built that first bike, it was a really great experience. But I was kind of like, well, what's next in this? And then he said, why don't make one out of titanium? And so I went and took the United Bicycle Institute titanium frame building course in
Hmm.
1996. Um, and it was taught by Gary Helfrich, who is
Okay.
one of the founders of Merlin.
Hmm.
So yeah, through that process, Moots got a hold of my name, and I got asked to come out to Colorado to interview for a welding position. And as soon as they offered it to me, I took it, and kind of the rest is history. And I did feel like that was a wonderful opportunity. I got out here, and I kind of initially thought to myself, like, okay, I'll do a year out here, figure it out, and then I'll get back to Oregon and I'll start my own brand.
Hmm.
But I got out to Colorado, and it's like, wow, I'm not going to go home and build better bikes than this. And
Mm.
I'm not going to go step away and just immediately be building better bikes. That's not going to happen. Um, and I fell in love with Colorado and the stoke that people have here.
Yeah.
So
Well, and what is it about, what was it about working at Moots that was particularly special for you? And like, who were some of your mentors? What'd you learn there?
well, it was a opportunity to work from the very bottom, the very bottom to the very top, kind of.
Okay.
And so I was able to experience, every part of manufacturing while I was there. Every part of manufacturing a bicycle frame from titanium.
Hmm.
Um, so I started out welding, but pretty. I did that pretty solid for oh, 5 years, 5, 6 years. Tons and tons of welding. But while at that time Kent Erickson was still employed by Moots, and so even in those first few years, I was helping. Kent never used a computer, and I brought some CAD skills with me. And so pretty quickly I was involved in design work, and any little part he wanted to get machined, we needed to do a drawing, and I was a drafts person. So I
Hmm.
could create an engineering, a print
Yeah.
that somebody could read and manufacture it really easily. So um, with a lot of those skills that I brought, I was able to evolve at Moots. I look back on it and I think, oh, it happened pretty quick, but really it took a number of years. And by 2004, I was the production manager at Moots and managing, the the flow of products through the factory. And at the time, I think it was about 14 or 16 guys and gals that were making the bikes. So, and then designing all the bikes after Kent left. And I was designing tooling, and, as new specifications came out, we would incorporate those into the bikes, and just making it all happen. And then, I finally got tired of the high volume. It got really, really big, and I was then, just like I said, kind of a cog in the machine. And then not long after my dad passed away, I kind of felt like it was time to make a change.
Yeah, that'll definitely catalyze some serious self-reflection for sure.
Yeah.
I think in my case as well, when my dad got sick, he had in my dad's case, it was a brain tumor. So it was a type that you usually don't get more than like 6, 8, 10 months from.
Yeah.
And from then I was like, okay, I moved back home, and resolved like, okay, what are the things that I would like to have done if I were on my deathbed, and that I would like to do and share with my father while he's still around. And shifted my whole life trajectory.
Sure. Yeah.
So
I hope, did you get the 6 or 8, 10 months with him?
He lasted about 8 months or so. He passed about 10 days before his 50th and my 25th birthdays. We shared the same birthday.
Wow.
And it was, I wanted to land a big account in the company I was working with. I wanted to get into a good grad school, and I wanted to get my pro upgrade as a racer. And I got two of the 3 before he passed. And then I had a good season later on the following year, and was a pack fodder pro for a hot minute. Gotcha. But again, like that reckoning of seeing a parental figure and someone that I admired and learned a lot from, towards the end of life, and maybe reflect a lot on what I want to do with my own.
Yeah. 50 is way too young.
Yeah.
Way too young. My dad was 63 when he passed away, and that felt way too young. I
think it is never a good age to lose a parent. Like it just brings with it different challenges. Like when you're a child, it's like you need that parental figure to help guide you through life. When you're going through your 20s or so, you're trying to discover yourself, and that guidance can be helpful. If you're in your 40s or 50s, I haven't had that experience, though I will. My mother's still around and still healthy, but then it's like you're confronting your own mortality. So part of the cycle of life.
Yeah, definitely.
So your dad passes, you decide it's time. So what did that process look like?
Yeah. So I chose to leave the job I'd been in for 15 years. And, they were a little surprised by it, because I had been there for so long. And, at the time I was playing a pretty integral part. So I went to part-time for, I gave them a healthy notice and went to part-time, and then, finally trailed off. And that was spring-ish of 2012. And I had no plans. I had bought a Airstream to renovate. So I did a shell off restoration on a 1973 Airstream. And
shell off renovation.
Yeah.
So you pulled the shell off the chassis, sandblasted the chassis.
Exactly.
All right, this we need to do a tangent on this, because I also did a camper build at one point. So tell me about this Airstream. I'm super curious.
What was the camper you did?
Mine I built out of a 15-foot V-nose motorcycle trailer.
Oh
because
yeah.
I had a Honda Element, which is a 4-cylinder,
Yep.
boxy little adventure mobile that I wanted to, use as a, I wanted to be able to tow around the country. So I built this ultra light, largely self-sustaining kind of
Yeah.
off-grid trailer, solar, thin film solar on the roof, and water recycling for the toilet and all the other stuff. And
Yeah. Cool.
yeah, it was an experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, mine was it was my brother-in-law's folks up in Montana. I was up in Montana in 2011 for like a U.S. Cup mountain bike race
Yeah.
up in Missoula, and
What year is this?
2011.
2011. Okay, so this is towards the tail end. I did the when it was the Kenda Cup.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were still sponsoring. It's like Show Air was a shipping logistics company that was sponsoring. This is like 08, 09, maybe
Yeah.
2010. So I think maybe the tail end.
Yeah, that sounds right. I don't even know if Kenda and Show Air were still involved. Like I raced like the like 2010. I think I was doing like the like San Dimas and Fontana.
Yep, I did those races.
Yep. Did you do them in
Okay,
20-
so you were a privateer pro as well, or were you on a team, or?
Yeah, I was. You know, it was moots.
Yeah.
I was riding the moots and just having
Huh.
fun with it.
What years did you race? I wonder if we actually lined up
Two
next to
thou-
each other at some
well,
point.
I raced pretty hard, like 9-10.
Yeah, same. You do Sea Otter?
Oh gosh, I don't think I did Sea Otter until like 2016.
Okay.
My yeah, my like pro mountain bike racing, it got sidetracked by 2 hip surgeries.
Oof.
So
Okay.
I'm trying to remember how hard I went in 2011. I feel like, oh yeah.
I had already retired by that point.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I've got way too much student loan debt to be living out of my car, spending money to be a professional athlete.
Yeah. So I had my major injury. I tore the labrum in my hip, which turns out was a genetic issue. And
Interesting. It's just weak in some way, or there's some sort of
shape of the femur.
Okay. My sister did the same thing, and she had to have hers shaved. Did you have the shaving surgery, or did you tear it right through?
The shaving. Yep.
Yeah.
Same. Yep.
Yeah.
So.
And then same thing on the other side?
Correct. Both sides. Yep.
Wow.
Identical. So that ended up, the pain was pretty bad and kind of set me back in 2012. And I prepped myself for surgery at the Stedman Clinic down in Vail, and had surgery on the right leg or the right hip, like February of 2013. And then I had my left one done July of 2013. So 2013 was kind of a throwaway year. And, I don't mean that entirely. It was a great year. But
in terms of competing at the highest level in athletics of any sort.
Yeah. And then
that makes sense.
But then I came back really hard 2014, and like just once I had the go ahead, and I had a wonderful physical therapist, and I was just getting after it hard. And so at that time also I was working for Kent Erickson, and he was like, all about it. Like, yeah, go do it. Go get it while you can, kind of. And I was
not something you do in your 40s unless you're or 50s unless you're Tinker or Ned.
So
Ned
I went 2014. I kind of got myself back in race shape and did things like Breck Epic, if you're familiar with that.
I am.
And
I got some friends who are doing it this year. I hear it's phenomenal.
And did a bunch of mountain biking, and then I kept ramping it up until about 2017. So it went pretty hard because my wife was was racing cross country as well. And so it was something we did together, and I would throw in road races and whatever.
I was going to say that makes a lot of sense that it was something you shared, because otherwise, I mean, you're on the road all the time, and
Yeah.
it's really hard to be on the road with, like, as a partner, be on the road with your partner who's out racing all the time, and
Yeah.
camping at different places, or
Yeah.
subletting, or doing whatever it takes, sleeping on sofas wherever.
Yeah. And so 2016 I turned 40 in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
So my goal was to do 40 races before I turned 40 that year.
Jeez.
So
that's impressive. I just turned 40, and I don't think I have a single race in me right now.
Yeah. That's all right. That's all right.
Yeah.
So yeah, anyways, but all the way back to the Airstream. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fun project, kind of kept me occupied. As after I had left Moots, it definitely kept me occupied for a good few months. And
did you tow that around with your wife? Training and racing everywhere, or were we just living in it?
It was a project. Like it took a long time to get it even to where it is today, which is I'd call it 90% done. I mean, it's one of those things.
Okay, good enough where your motivation is less than
lacking. Yes, it's waning.
Yeah.
Yes, but I
think that's part of the dangerous spot that I'm in, because I also am like comfortable enough, and I got other priorities, but got to keep things moving along.
Yeah. So yeah, but anyway, I didn't have any plans to start. I had no plans to be building bikes after I left Moots. I just was like, I'm okay with taking some time and figuring out whatever the heck happens. And then Ken Erickson, who had left Moots in 2005, he had been doing his thing for a while, and he reached out and said, "Hey, how about you come back to me, and with the intention that you take over the business." So
all right.
So that's
so this is his independent business.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, he started Kent Erickson Cycles about a year and a half after he left Moots.
Mm-hmm.
So 2006. So he'd been going for about 6-7 years.
And is he a few years your senior?
Yeah.
So he's been at it a long time.
Oh yeah.
And how long did you work together before he started to kind of transition out of the business?
So it would have been late 2012 until the late 2016. So 4 years that till we bought the business, and then he was on board working for about 18 months afterwards.
Oh wow.
So 5.5 years. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's like quite an arc to have worked together in a different business, have him leave, and then have you kind of take on his thing, and have him supporting you in that role.
Totally.
That sounds really beautiful.
Yeah. He and I, we have a good relationship. I don't spend very much time with him because he does tend to kind of hermit himself up on his property, and he just, he has a beautiful piece of property up in the mountains, and it's like, his slice of heaven. Like, he doesn't need to go anywhere. But to see him, you pretty much got to go up there. And but our working relationship is super good. Like, really loved the time we worked together. Is very much a lot of back and forth and a lot of mutual respect. And neither of us really got upset with like criticisms, I mean, we were just really open with each other. So it was nice.
And you said we bought the business, and I know that I spoke together with my colleague Sam with
Yep.
your wife
Yep.
initially before chatting with you. So,
Yeah.
uh, tell, share a bit about her and how the
Sure.
two of you work together and so on.
Sure. And actually, I mean, I kind of misspoke because technically it's only myself that owns the business, but
Hmm.
we were together, are together in everything that we do there. So it
Yeah,
feels like it feels like we bought it. um,
yeah.
but yeah, so yeah, Hannah and I have been together since 2010, like late 2010, and just a fun, like, athletic athletic based relationship because
Hmm.
she was a runner at the time we met, and I was kind of like still enjoying some running. Like, I did my first marathon with her, and my first and only. Wait, I should I should have had that.
I
Um,
mean, that's more than many cyclists will do. Most cyclists, I don't even know.
sure,
A lot of cyclists I know will joke that they don't know how to run.
right,
So
right,
doing a single marathon is not bad.
yeah. So yeah, we had actually, we'd never worked together, but with this idea of me taking over the business, um, I really wanted somebody there that I could trust to run the books. I knew that that would take such a burden off of me, and
Hmm.
so we agreed that that's how we would do it, and it's worked out really well. Um, and yeah, she had been working in some other outdoor companies that are located in Steamboat Springs. She'd been doing bookkeeping and accounting for those companies, so she was
Hmm.
well versed and ready to take it on. Um, and then
And
she mhm.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, and she also, like, she makes the website happen, makes the web store happen, keeps all the back end stuff going. So it's
Hmm.
it's a huge component to the business. I'm sure,
Oh yeah.
as you know, um, it really allows me to draw some lines of things that I work on and things that I don't work on.
I mean, it's exhausting otherwise. Especially like early days when if it's just one person or just two people
Mm-hmm.
and everyone's doing everything. Uh, I mean, it works for some people, but it definitely constrains scale, and it also means that there's a lot of context switching from, now I want to focus on product, but now I have to do a whole bunch of customer service emails, and then
Sure.
I need to do some marketing outreach, and have we paid that bill yet?
Yep. Yep.
Uh,
But we're tiny. We're a tiny little operation. So
it's the two of you?
it's the two of us and one employee.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what's your other team member doing?
So Ed is our third man, and
Hmm.
he's like does all of the final assemblies. So
Okay.
complete build outs. Um, he is he's a veteran of the bike world. He used to own one of the bike shops here in downtown Steamboat. He's a certified motorcycle mechanic. Um,
Hmm.
so he's just awesome, super diverse. So he builds all of my wheels. Like I said, does the final assemblies. He kind of manages the web orders and ships product based on those incoming web orders. Um, and then
Hmm.
and then he's also in production. So he's uh, does all the finish work on the frames.
Hmm.
That's like bead blasting and polishing, brushing, everything that kind of takes place after I weld it, if you
Hmm.
will. Um, and then
And so
help.
you're doing the tube selection, mitering,
Yeah,
and all the upstream of there. Is that right?
correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then he has.
Jigging and things
Oh
like that.
yeah, Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So he has some, some machining, some other machining roles as well, but those are like, it's really funny just how they fall into the production process. Cause like, you like, yeah, it's like, we always need something. There's always something to be done.
So
So,
what's the process like? Like, say, one of our listeners was looking to get a custom bike built with you.
yeah.
How does the communication work? What's the process you take them through?
Yeah. So typically they reach out, excuse me. Typically they reach out through the website,
Yeah.
and then the conversation starts. We have a pretty basic kind of intake form, if you will, a fit form, and we start with that. That does have a lot of measurements that they can provide. If I were to be creating the fit based on those measurements, but what I am seeing more and more is that clients are coming with a fit. Most often a retool fit.
Yep. Same.
Totally dialed.
Same.
Yep. And so then depending on our workload, sometimes we have to delay the conversation because I've just got too many clients currently that I'm working with. So
It's a good problem to have.
yeah, generally it's a good problem.
Yeah.
So, but we start the conversation. Again, every client is a little bit different. So no scenario is exactly the same, but most often we create an estimate for the build out that they're looking for. If it's a complete build, of course they want to see what that's going to look like. So we provide estimates with with no deposit, no obligation to purchase. We want them to see how they're spending their money.
Mm-hmm.
Once they're satisfied that like that things look good, then we take a deposit, and then we really dive into the design work. Try to avoid putting in a lot of front end design work with no with no obligation.
Sure. And I mean, you can go pretty far in kind of teasing out a high level understanding of what the rider needs, and also they can get a real sense of whether it's going to be the right match for them, with those initial conversations. So that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And then when you're looking at like, okay, so what are walk us through like the different parameters of frame design for a particular rider. What are the different levers that you can pull, and then what information are you teasing out from the rider?
Yeah.
Either through that fit info or those conversations to determine, how that bike gets created.
Yeah. So, I mean, you want to get kind of deep?
Oh yeah, let's go full nerd. So I think I shared with you previously, like I did a 2-episode conversation with Craig Calfee that got into boron infused resin, and like
sure.
I think Josh Portner and I were talking about the creation of CAD tools for modeling a spinning wheel. So we can go as nerdy as we like.
Yeah.
So yeah, give us the full nerd version.
Well, since we're on the gravel ride, let's talk a little bit around a gravel bike. But when there's, so for example, a lot of my clients do tend to be like, they're experienced riders of a certain age, let's say. So a lot of those fits, they are changing. So, you really want to look at all of the parameters, and, weight bias, rear wheel, front wheel is a biggie. So you kind of identify that pretty quickly. You can adjust that, of course, by front center and stem length to achieve a weight bias that you're happy with. But generally speaking, you want to with those more upright positions, you want to have increased trail. You want to have a longer front center. Um, you want, you know, if you're gonna have a short stem, you want higher trail.
Yeah, because you're effectively, without all else equal on the trail side, you're speeding up the ratio of less input for the same amount of output when you go with a shorter stem.
Correct.
Less stability. Yeah.
Yeah. And then depending on, you know, what you've done with the like chainstay length and the rear wheel weight bias, you know, that quickly lightens the front end. So you need to be careful there. So yeah, and it's like every rider is different. If you're more aggressive and, you know, racy on the gravel bike, then yeah, you might be looking for um, for a longer stem, more weight on the front contact patch.
Potentially less frontal area in a more kind of, locomotive type position for long flats and things like that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. You know, a lot of those things, a lot of those changes do end up being perception and not all that much reality. The frontal area, yeah, it's huge, right?
Yeah.
But wheelbase doesn't, you know, if a shorter wheelbase is going to be perceived as quick, oh, this is fast, right? But no, it's not. You're not going any faster because you have.
Sure. Yeah. It's the sensation of speed
Yes.
and responsiveness, which, the flip side of the same coin is twitchiness, right? Whether it's responsive or twitchy depends on who you are and whether you've crossed the line from one into the other.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but in the custom world, it's nice because you have all of the levers to pull. You can do anything with it, which is wonderful. Because I do see a lot of pretty odd or out of the norm cockpits, and you really want to give them an experience. You want to create a bike underneath them that just feels right. Like, wow, this is comfortable. I mean, it's, you know, a longer wheelbase on a gravel bike is really much more comfortable for the long haul. If especially if you're an older rider, the frequency of bumps, washboards, you can change that drastically with a slightly longer wheelbase.
Tell me more about that. How does that actually work?
Well, because you have the slacker head angle, which inherently allows the fork to flex a little more.
Okay.
Right. And then the longer wheelbase, just geometrically, it doesn't have to, the angle of change is lessened.
Okay.
As you go over a rise or through a pothole, that angle of change is lessened on a longer wheelbase.
It hadn't occurred to me that, so you're saying like a degree of head tube angle change, all else equal, same fork, same tubes and everything else, will actually
you'll
materially
feel that. Yeah. You'll feel that flex. That definitely.
Got it. Because I was thinking of it purely in terms of its effect on trail, or like the caster effect to simplify it for those who don't know trail, and potentially the introduction of tire flop, which usually isn't an issue on gravel bikes because the head tubes aren't slack enough.
Yeah. So there's that. There's also, again, back to like slightly longer wheelbase, shorter stem. I think there is some also comfort gained by how much weight is on the hands, what you feel through the front, but that's really driven by the overall cockpit and the fit parameters,
Yeah.
So, but
yeah, basically where those 3 points in space where the angle of the hypotenuse between them.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty quick to tell the difference and how smooth bikes are with those pretty small dimensional changes. But it's been difficult for me even in design where I go, oh wow, I don't want to change the front center by that much. Like, oh, that's 20 millimeters, and then you have to remember, wait, it's 20 millimeters. It's nothing. Like,
well, as a percentage, if you're dealing with a bike that has a wheelbase, use a round number of like 1,000. Usually, a large gravel bike could be a bit longer than that.
Yeah.
20 millimeters, so 2%.
Right. Nothing.
Yeah.
But it's
so in terms of mass distribution over the two axles, it's going to be bigger than that because it's relative to its distance to the bottom bracket. So the rear end is staying, unless you change the rear end with it as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think oftentimes it is smart to adjust that rear center accordingly, because otherwise you will end up with too much rear weight bias.
Yeah.
So.
Which can be fun if you like wheelies and for a certain type of riding.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. Like, the bike I'm riding right now is, I think it's about a 427 chainstay. Mm-hmm. That's center to center, not horizontal, but center to center. It's like a 427.
So horizontal, it's going to be 423. It's a pretty tight.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Actually, no, not that much, but 424 or something like that.
Yeah, actually, I think it is less because the drop is probably. I think the drop on my rig is like at least 73, 75, maybe. I forget now, mm-hmm. But that's a pretty tight rear, and then the front is like I think my current ride is like a 71.7 head angle mm-hmm. with a 47 fork. 46.
How tall are you?
Probably 5'10", maybe
5'10".
Yeah.
Okay. So on a larger, medium, smaller, large sort of.
Yeah.
If you were to fall into a conventional bike.
Yeah. And
just for context, because then understanding like an extra large rider is going to be riding. Even if you scaled that bike up, well, you can't really because the wheels don't scale.
Right.
And so you have to adjust those angles and those lengths and stuff like that, not just proportional, but also to account for the fact that the wheels are staying, which I always thought was an interesting opportunity. You do see some brands that will, restrict to like a 650B on their smallest sizes, for example.
Yeah, definitely. You do see that a lot. Yeah.
I think we should bring back 26 for those really small riders who want to run 2.4s, but I guess it's not enough of a market or a marketing edge to be gained from it. So
I find that my more experienced clients that are very small, they're really looking for 700. So they don't.
Yeah, it's interesting. Same. And how much of that is, what do you think are the drivers of that? Do you think it's actually better for the vast majority of those riders, or?
I think that again, kind of back to that actually going fast, comfortably going fast, you're going to do that better on a 700 than on a 650.
Yeah, just rolling resistance, attack angle, things like this.
Yes, exactly. And
so worth the compromises on maybe responsiveness or what have you, because you're definitely giving up something there, even if you do proportional cranks.
For sure. Yeah. But I think like there's, how it is. There's the sharp end of a Peloton. They want, or the entire Peloton, they want responsiveness.
Yeah.
But so
how do you do it on those really small frames? Like, you have a 5 foot tall rider come in
4 foot,
and they want to do gravel racing. 4'10". Yeah. 4'10". I mean, it's unfortunate. There's almost nothing out there off the shelf for a rider who's 4'10". And they
Yeah.
end up on these bikes with no standover and a 40 mil stem, and they're still not fit properly.
Yeah. So I take advantage of 7 cycles.
Yep.
They've been producing a fork called the Matador for quite a while. It has a 55 millimeter offset,
Mm-hmm.
so you can get pretty slack with the front end and still keep it, on the
Pretty quick.
lowish side of trail. Um,
Yeah, and for those who don't know, when you increase the offset, you decrease the trail, all else equal.
Correct.
And when you increase the head angle, you decrease the trail as well. You essentially less trail, less caster effect, all else equal, more responsive or more twitchy, depending on whether you've crossed over into, if you went too far, you wouldn't be able to handle the bike over much.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those, and toe overlap is a real thing. And when you start talking about a bike that's going to clear a 45 millimeter tire, so
for a 410 rider,
yeah,
that's hard to pull off. Are you finding proportional cranks too? Are you running 150s or 145s or this sort of thing?
Yeah, I think to date, 150 is the smallest I've gone.
Yeah.
So, but those bikes, they're not racing at a high level. They're out enjoying gravel rides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those, I'll just comment anecdotally, the conversations I've had, particularly with some of our smallest riders, is proportional crank lengths makes such a big difference. And like people are just used to riding the same cranks that you and I, ride their whole lives, and they never knew anything different. Or like their bike, I've had riders that are 5 foot tall and their bikes came with 175s. They had a hybrid or something like that, or they're coming off of something, or like an older road bike. And I put them on 155s, and it's just like, I can spin.
Yeah.
I can spin at high cadences. My pedal stroke doesn't fall apart when I'm tired.
Well, also, you look at bike frame design, and bike frame design has been dictated by what is a common crank arm length, 170 to 175.
Yeah, exactly. Together with, the outer tire radius, which is in turn driven by the rim dimensions. So like 650B or 26 versus 700 and so on, puts different constraints. And then you have BB drop. If you have smaller wheels, you can't have as much BB drop, which means you're kind of more on top of the bike. And so you have all these different factors that impact each other that you're balancing.
Yeah. And I'd say overall, my design philosophy is to have the kind of the lowest possible center of gravity. So maintaining, a low bottom bracket, whatever is acceptable for wheelbase, crank arm length, intended pedal, all those things.
Yeah. Essentially there's really not much reason not to go as low as you can go without risking pedal strikes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
For more or less any application.
Yep.
And it's just a matter of what the application demands. Like a road bike that's doing crit racing is going to need a higher BB because you want to be able to pedal out of the corner as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Dual suspension mountain bike, same deal, but it's you need a higher BB because you have all that squish.
Yeah. Yeah. Cyclocross bikes, side hilling. And
yeah. So it's interesting, as gravel has taken over cross and road, arguably, you have like a lot of people who previously might have had a road bike now might only have a gravel bike that they use for road too.
Sure.
But like cross bikes have seemed to kind of converge with gravel bikes. You don't see a lot of high BB cross bikes, at least to my knowledge, on the production side anymore.
Correct. I think that's been driven by how people are actually using the bikes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So we've gone pretty deep on geometry. How about tubes?
Mm-hmm. So in my world, I work with titanium exclusively, and everything that I have in house is straight gauge tubing.
Okay.
The
And
majority.
is this all preformed as tubes, or are you buying any flat sheets and rolling and welding them?
No, nothing
That's like
like.
the 6-4 stuff.
Yeah. Like I have visited some of those factories that perform that function, but it's just not. Yeah, in my opinion, it's barking up the wrong tree. Um, the tubing that I get, the vast majority of it is from Washington State, from Sandvik, which is actually they just recently were kind of rebranded to their Swedish parent company name, which is Alima. So it's
Interesting. Sandvik makes the wire that's used in spokes as well.
uh, I believe it.
Yeah. So like we use pillar spokes and they use Sandvik. I think Sapim does as well. And
Sure.
it makes sense, right? These are high grade,
Yeah.
high performance alloys.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
So
didn't know that.
there's only two places in the United States that produces titanium tubing, and that's Alima in Washington State and Haynes in Louisiana.
And
So
that's actually produced. So they're getting the raw material from somewhere and they're forming it into tubes here, forming it into alloys here, or
exactly.
alloying it and then forming it here.
Yeah. The what they refer to as tube hollow, that is kind of the last step of the process before it actually becomes a tube. That tube hollow is all sorted out. Like the alloy is correct, the condition is correct, and then they manufacture the tube from that. And then from that point forward, all they can do to it is alter the condition through annealing and working.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
So the vast majority of my tubes come from Washington State, and those come in typically in like 17-foot lengths.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So you have a dedicated truck coming to you. You're buying
Oh yeah.
enough to move that sort of thing. You're not doing less than container load. You're doing like a
Well,
box truck or something.
yeah. I mean, it usually comes by freight. It's and then you have minimum footage requirements
Yeah.
per purchase. So, and that's minimum footage requirement per diameter per wall thickness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you have to buy, it ends up being thousands of feet of material to have enough material selection on hand that you feel good about the tubing you can offer.
So you're buying, and you're sourcing just for yourself. You're not consolidating with other builders.
Correct. Yeah, nobody else.
Wow. That's a big commitment of capital.
It is. It's very, very large.
So I would imagine like you basically spend a whole bunch of money early in the season, and well, I guess you're probably able to kind of keep your demand consistent over the years. So you probably do a couple buys a year or something like that.
Yeah, you end up buying enough material that you'll have that material for literally years.
Mm.
So
I think especially some of the more esoteric SKUs with high minimum order quantities.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's okay. Like that is the titanium world, because if you want the highest quality American made tubing, then that's what it takes. Period.
Yeah.
No other.
That makes sense. And then what are other people doing? Are they working through distributors and just paying? I'm curious about the business side of it as well.
Yeah.
Like, are there so here in the Hudson Valley where I am, we have Vicious Cycles and Carl. Yeah. So I was out on a ride with him the other day. He'll be at Made as well. I know you'll be at Made too.
Yeah.
But the other side of his business, I forget the name of it, is I think the biggest distributor of steel tubes, or one of the biggest distributors of steel tubes.
Yeah.
And so you can do small batch, you can order as you go,
Yep.
but presumably pay a premium. But does that sort of thing must exist in titanium as well?
It doesn't.
Not as much.
Not in the same way. You can certainly purchase tube sets like from Data Chai, Columbus, but those are all Reynolds, Aura titanium, but those are all overseas third party.
Aura's Taiwan, right?
Yeah, Aura's Taiwan.
I've been to their factory.
Yeah, I have some
Yeah.
dropouts coming from them to check out. Hopefully they're here like today or tomorrow.
Very cool.
But titanium is just such a difficult material to create. There's not a lot of players in that world, and it's expensive.
Yeah.
So that to put that outlay of capital to create tube sets for distribution, like that's being taken on by those larger companies like Columbus, Data Chai, and such.
It reminds me, I'm going to go off on a tangent here. You ever hear about the Black Hawk spy plane? This thing could do like Mach 3.4.
Yeah, they called it kerosene coffin.
Yeah, it used to leak.
Yeah.
The temperatures when you're going Mach 3 plus are so high because you're essentially compressing the air ahead of you and creating that massive shock wave, but also you just, compressing all that heat energy, and then it's impossible to dissipate it faster. And the expansion in the titanium would be such that they built it so that it was leaking when it took off, and then all the gaps would seal up when you're actually up in the air, and then they'd have to do air-to-air refueling.
I'm kind of
that thing.
I'm kind of an SR-71 Blackbird nerd. Yeah.
Nerd. All right. So then you know about how the titanium was sourced?
Oh, well, no. Maybe I've heard
from the USSR through like intermediaries.
Interesting.
So a US Soviet Union. So a US spy plane built to spy on the Soviet Union, and I think that plane was launched in the 70s.
The Blackbird?
Was it even earlier?
Well, it was earlier. It was developed in the 50s and into the 60s.
Maybe decommissioned in the 70s, or
well, it was top secret until I forget the date, but yeah.
Until that I always found that interesting, that it's like buying this material but it does speak to the fact not just of Cold War tensions, but also of even a power as seemingly mighty as the US had to source this particular material from an adversary, because of what you're speaking to, the difficulty of producing it.
Yeah.
And then you get into like the properties of this material, which were essential to being able to create that craft at the time in the first place. But that craft required major compromises in usability that made it dangerous and expensive to build and operate. Sitting in a pool of kerosene on a runway is I guess does it light easily? I don't think it lights all that easily, but
no, not a good thing. They just said that that's what they called it, just because you could smell the fuel,
Yeah.
But the SR-71 was a development project, that we can thank for so much of the titanium that we use today, and a lot of the manufacturing processes that were used in the 90s, to make, Merlin, Lightspeed, all those brands. Have you ever been up close to an SR?
No. So, where can you do it?
I think, they tend to travel around to the different air and space museums. I was up close with one in McMinnville, Oregon, at the Evergreen Aviation Museum, and that was super cool. They were allowing you to sit in it as well.
No kidding.
But then I believe there was one at the Pima Air and Space Museum in Tucson.
Yep.
So up
right by the Boneyard.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah.
Which is the decommissioning location. You just have, if you've ever those listening, if you've ever seen pictures of thousands of
Yeah.
aircraft sitting in a desert, that's the boneyard outside of Tucson. It's an insane place.
Yeah.
But
at that, the one I was looking at there, when you went up to the jet engine cowling, and you look closely, you're looking at these massive pieces of titanium, and if you look closely, you can see the end mill machining marks, and you can see how that was machined, and it was probably done manually.
Oh yeah,
and
especially at that age, at that vintage,
the hours and hours that probably went into that. So pretty cool. Yeah, cool stuff.
There's you've probably come across this videos on YouTube with interviewing the engineers who worked on that project. In particular, some of the okay, welcome to your next rabbit hole.
I rarely go down the YouTube rabbit hole.
This is a worthy one, I would say. There was one there was a couple interviews I watched with someone who worked on the engines for that craft. So an engine that's pushing 3.2, 3.4 Mach at again 50s, 60s technology.
Yeah.
And one, it's cool stuff, but two, just the delight that you see in he's still in 2023 giving tours and talking about that experience of working on these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, super cool.
Yeah. Cool. All right. So we've thank you for indulging my rabbit hole. Seems like we have another thing in common. So okay. So you have your tubes.
Yeah. Yep. And then I do supplement. There are limitations for sure to the manufacturing capability of U.S. titanium tube makers. So
what are those limitations?
Diameter. So
okay,
they only go so large, and
so that's mostly that's not a technology thing. That's more of a marketability thing, presumably.
Yeah,
like not enough scale. Or is it hard to create certain diameters at certain wall thicknesses?
It is hard because it is the diameter to wall ratio that does get very, very difficult in titanium. But yeah, I think that
how's it formed?
So
is it formed out of sheets that are auto welded or?
No, it's a seamless drawn tube from what's referred to as a tube hollow. And
is this like Play-Doh Fun Factory sort of forming process?
It's like drawn over a mandrel.
Okay.
Yeah, and basically beaten into submission. So they can only produce up to a certain size, a certain wall thickness. So there's a lot of large diameter down tubes that are being used these days, and I'm definitely on board with that. So I will pick those up from Titanium Joe out of the Northeast there.
Okay.
New York and Ontario. He's got warehousing. So I'll go there for like a 1 3/4 diameter down tube. I do some 2-inch diameter down tubes. For tandems, I'll even do like a 2 1/4 outside diameter, like boom tube and down tube. So yeah, and those are typically a Chinese sourced tube, but they're pretty damn good. They've proven themselves to be pretty good over time.
And this is torsional stiffness, bottom bracket stiffness, things like this.
Yeah,
heavier riders who want more responsiveness on acceleration, things like that.
Yeah. Also, stiffness is what's going to eliminate any kind of like harmonic balance where get any kind of like speed wobble, if you will.
Yeah.
There's two major factors. Well, there's like 3 major factors. Frame stiffness, just straight up.
Yeah.
Frame stiffness, period. And, titanium 25 years ago had a pretty bad rap of being noodly, right? So yeah, you can certainly eliminate that by going to a larger diameter down to kind of, beefing everything up a bit. But, luckily we've seen all these advances in frame design, larger head tubes, stiffer steerer tubes. That all adds, the fork is a important component when it comes to stiffness of the entire assembly.
So monocoque carbon fork construction. Yep.
Yeah. And also the stiffer suspension forks as well have made things much better. But then, and then secondly, alignment of the bicycle is huge because that's what can, set off people. You rarely hear builders talk about alignment. And it's like, alignment is at the top of the list. That's number one.
I think it's taken for granted too on the other side.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is my geometry. But then again, when we talk about geometry, we're not talking about tolerances, and none of those numbers. If we're not talking about tolerances, we're certainly not talking about tolerances of like the center of the BB relative to the center of the rear axle and the alignment of those two axes and things like this.
Exactly. And that's right at the top of the list. Like, again, like I've had a long time, 27 years of building bikes to kind of try to figure it out. And I think honestly, like alignment is at the top of the list. It's like, that's what makes a bike feel good.
Well, let's talk about all the ways that can go wrong too, because it's not just the design in the jigging, it's also the heat treatment, right?
Well, there's no post welding.
No post with titanium.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
So then how do you end up with poor alignment? What are the things that could drive that?
Yeah. For poor alignment, gaps, like in your fit ups.
Okay.
You're fitting a tube to drop outs, bottom bracket shell, chainstay to bottom bracket shell. Every piece of the bike, every single piece that goes together can give you a place for poor alignment.
Mm-hmm.
So how the down tube fits up to the head tube, that's crummy. That's not going to be good. So this
is how precise you set up all of your machining tools when you're doing your mitering.
Yes.
How precisely everything is fitted up in the jig when you're going to actually do the TIG work.
Yep.
Or is it TIG or MIG for titanium?
TIG, yeah.
TIG.
Tungsten.
Yeah. Tungsten inert gas.
Yep. Yeah. And so yeah, I would say the biggest issue with metal bikes and alignment is simply, poor fit ups, gaps, maybe too much heat through the welding process in one specific area. You do get a lot of change of shape, especially in titanium. That's why people don't love building titanium bikes sometimes, because it really moves around a lot.
Yeah, and you don't just throw the whole thing in an oven and bake it.
Correct. Yeah. So
that's two things. And the third one, the geometry of the bike, and particularly, trail as a primary driver.
I was going to say weight bias as far as.
Oh, okay.
If you're making.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So like imagine somebody who's already in a really, really upright position and then puts a rack on the bike and puts 50 pounds on the rear rack. Like.
Oh yeah. Well, and that weight distribution too. It's funny. I was just in a forum telling somebody who got the same cargo bike that I did that their stacked up stem assembly is going to end up with them dead, because they added like a riser stem on top of a riser stem on a folding stem assembly, and they have the top one is the top stem's adjustable, and he's got it pointed straight upright, and then the bars are slightly swept back, so like the grips are like right. If you draw a line between the grips, it would probably intersect right at the center of the steering axis. There's like nothing resisting this bike just flopping over. We might be getting a bit esoteric here, but if you're listening, don't do that.
Yeah.
especially on a bike that's, in that case, you mentioned racks and things like that. Like when you have, in addition to the rider, these other masses, now you have a dynamic system where you're getting like an additional oscillation loop because the bike is doing its little wiggle thing, and then the rider is trying to compensate. And depending on, the response rate of that rider's brain and their ability to move their muscles in response, it could actually create a resonance that amplifies rather than dampens that speed wobble or whatever it is.
Sure.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. So it all comes back to building stiff bikes. Titanium is wonderful in that regard because you can build a stiff titanium bike that still maintains that nice resilience, that feel of tie.
And tell me more about that. So how do the properties of it compare to, like, obviously you can make a tube heavier, thicker, or whatever, and get certain properties, but in a high performance bike that's light enough that people actually want to ride it, how does it compare to steel? And then on the other end, carbon is a non-homogeneous material. Like you can lay it up however you want it. It's a composite. So what are the differences in terms of ride characteristics and why?
Sure.
Between the different materials.
Sure. So I'm not a materials scientist, I'm not a materials engineer. So I won't be able to get too deep on you here. But basically, titanium has a very high modulus of elasticity. So it's very happy to bend, which that's why some of those old tie bikes and even underbuilt tie bikes can be referred to as a noodle because of that high modulus. That's what it likes to do. But in the right alloys, in the right size, and the right wall thickness, everything kind of comes together to give a really beautiful feel. Along with,
and by size you mean tube diameter.
Yeah. So as a material, titanium is, like, compared to steel, like steel is going to have a higher tensile, right? It's going to have a higher tensile. It's going to be obviously quite a bit heavier, but with that higher tensile, you don't need as much of it. And so you can pare it down. Wall thicknesses on steel tube sets are quite a bit thinner than titanium tube sets, generally speaking.
Yeah, though also you have to kind of keep tube diameters smaller in order for weight not to get out of control, even with those thin wall thicknesses. And
absolutely.
in turn, your stiffness is going up with the next, what was it, with the square of tube diameter?
If you say so.
Something like that.
But the other,
I'm sure that someone, a mechanical engineer in the audience, will chime in, and correct me on that.
Yeah. But so from, as I understand it, the steel, you can pare it down. That's why budding of steel tubes is so beneficial, because that reduction of material does equate to a very nice reduction in overall weight. But it also adds to the ride quality.
It's kind of maximizing the tube diameter and minimizing the wall thickness. Right up to the point where you're getting a higher risk of failure due to it bending in compression or getting dented.
Correct. Yeah, and that's why I don't really prescribe to the double butted tube sets for titanium. Because you can maintain a thin wall. You go with a larger OD. When you start talking about removing some of that material, all, in my opinion, all you are doing is making a bike that is much more vulnerable to denting and failure.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah. And I'll certainly say as my riding changes, I'd much rather have those extra grams and a bike that lasts forever and won't fail catastrophically on me. Than something that's pushed to the very edges of what material can do under the ideal conditions.
Exactly.
I.e., not putting it down, not leaning it against something improperly, not having it fall on itself.
Yeah. I really, I'm at the heart. The reason I started building bikes in the first place was because I had a couple of bikes break, and I was like, bikes, they shouldn't break like that. So, I am informed by that, that the bike really should not fail. It should be something that you put a lot of trust in. You're going very fast on a bike. You're putting yourself in situations that if a failure occurs, it can be really dangerous. So let's just go ahead and.
Well, we do have like a styrofoam cooler on our heads with a little plastic shell around it, so that'll keep us safe. And we get some adamantium armor in the form of Lycra.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, titanium, especially for gravel bikes, is a wonderful material because it can take such a beating. Yeah, you hear those rocks getting thrown up by the front tire, and you just keep hammering.
Well, and if you scratch it, you can polish it out, or
you can. Yep.
Yeah.
So they're not impervious to major damage. I've seen my fair share, but overall pretty robust.
Well, we've covered a lot here. What other things should people keep in mind when considering both a custom bike generally and a titanium bike specifically?
Gosh.
What do you see as the advantages and the things to look out for when, say, choosing a builder?
Wow. Kind of put me on the spot, but I think you got to go. I would definitely say that find out who the builder is, and if you really jive with them, then move forward and have a good experience with them. Like don't hesitate. I think finding somebody you can trust, that you feel good talking to. I think that somebody that doesn't put up a lot of barriers to communication, that's important. And just finding somebody, like I said, that you can trust. I think that's probably the most important component.
I think between your many years of experience and your pedigree and training and the way in which you've communicated what you do, how you do it, why you do it, where you come from, and so on here, I'm very excited to see some of your work at Made. Yeah. And how would anyone who's interested get a hold of you if they want to have a bike built?
The very easiest way is to just contact through our website. Just to contact us right there. It goes directly to myself or my wife.
Yeah. And what's that address?
And that's binghambuiltbikes.com.
Excellent. Well, Brad, thank you so much for your time and for letting me pick your brain a little bit, and really looking forward to continuing the conversation in person towards the end of August when I see you in Portland.
Yeah. This has been really fun and been neat getting to know you, and wild how many similarities we have in our history.
I'm sure there's quite a few more.
So that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Gravel Ride podcast. I hope you learned as much as I did in that conversation between Brad and Randall. Thanks to them both for sharing so much knowledge with us on the podcast this week. If you're able to support the show, ratings and reviews are hugely appreciated. Or if you're able to support the show financially, please visit buymeacoffee.com/thegravelride. I hope everybody's had a great week, and here's to finding some dirt under your wheels.